Well, welcome to our webinar today, Making the Sustainability Case for Paper. Facts Matter with our friends from Two Sides North America. We've got Jules VanSant and Joe Crossley here with us today. We really appreciate them for joining us and telling us more about Two Sides and what's going on in the paper market, especially around sustainability. As most of you on this call know, BMI, we're very much about being very friendly and collegial with all of our book and paper related associations we're all working together, and a rising tide floats all boats. So we want to help Two Sides. They want to help us, and we're glad to have them here. So I'm gonna hand it over to Jill and Jules, and if you have questions during the event at all, feel free to use the chat function. We're going to keep everybody muted during the presentation, and then we can open it up for Q&A at the end where you can unmute yourself. But if there's something you want to remember or have a specific question, please feel free to use the chat, and I'll take care of it from there. Okay. So Jill and Jules, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. And thanks everyone for being here. I am Jules VanSant. My partner over there, Jill Crossley, is Director of Operations. I'm Executive Director of Two Sides North America. Jill and I have been working for a number of years on the marketing and communications side of Two Sides. Kathy Rousey, who's on the call today. Hi, Kathy. She has retired and moved on to some other adventures. And so we are excited to carry her mantle after all the work that she's done and continue to share the information about how print, paper, and paper-based packaging and books have a great environmental story to tell. So we're going to dive right in. And Jill, if you want, perfect. So we are your industry advocate when it comes to all things paper. We promote the sustainability of the paper industry and its products, working within our membership, working with other organizations, gathering information, consolidating research, conducting research, and bringing the communities together to really tell that story about paper. And in doing that, then we go after claims that are misleading about the environmental impact of paper, paper making, paper recycling, and the impact it has on the environment. And so any of that you hear, and you'll learn a little bit more through our presentation, but if you come across any of those claims, we're going to give you some information on how to get it to us so that we can get out there and get some of the facts straight and get some of that consumer-based messaging corrected. We are part of a global nonprofit member-funded organization. Jill and I oversee North America, so Canada and the US. But globally, there's over 600 members and growing. That are part of the paper value chain. So anywhere from the creation, the associations behind it, the manufacturing, the distribution, merchants, print production, finishing, the whole 9 yards. So we try to bring in, just like with BMI, people from different parts of the industry to consolidate those voices and help us to continue to tell the story. And one of the deliverables that we do on a regular basis is our trend tracker report. In 2023, it was released, the trend tracker summary, based on a longer report that talks about a survey that was done, consumer-based, to try to better understand what their beliefs are around paper, forestry, and recycling. So that gives us some data that we then has been consolidated. There's a longer report, but our members have access to a summary report that then can be used to put messaging within your own communications, your website, get out to salespeople to really start to spread the truth the more our voices come together to tell this topic, the better we start to see consumer perceptions change. So in doing that, let's talk about what some of those consumer perceptions are and how they have changed based on what we saw in this survey. So the first one is that paper and paper-based packaging are bad for the environment. If you have anyone, I have kids in their 20s and, I start talking to them about this. Well, you're killing trees, Mom. And it's like, no, we're not killing trees. So, and these are smart people. So we do have a perception issue. But, we see that only 44% of our respondents thought that it was bad for the environment, down from 48. We're starting to see a little bit of movement. So that's good. Tells us that we're going in the right direction. One of the other questions was, what do you think has been happening to the US forests? Again, deforestation is this big, that's what, the myth that people believe is happening. The reality is that that's not the case. And Jill's going to dive into that in a little bit. But again, 55% believe that they're reducing in size, down from 60. So again, we're seeing some positive movement there. One of the other questions was, what percentage of paper and paper-based packaging do you think gets recycled? Now, 12%, it's up from 11% that more than 60% does. So perceptions there, and I know there's more and more news coming out with the advent of Amazon and everyone ordering during our stay-at-home moment of the C word, which I will not use, that we're starting to see that there is more and more reporting about the recyclability of paper and paper-based packaging. So we hope to continue to influence that number to rise. One of the other questions we had, paper and paper-based packaging are major cause of greenhouse gas emissions. Again, climate change is in the news every single day. So right now, 43% of our respondents agreed with that. And we haven't seen that change. So that's an area of focus that we hope to continue to gather more data on. And then paper and paper-based packaging production uses excessive amounts of water. Again, Jill's going to kind of go through some of the facts here in a little bit, but the perception is that 50% of the respondents do believe that it uses too much water. It's not the case at all, so we have some work to do there to educate some of the consumers. So all of these misconceptions, how do they become? Well, one of the bigger influences are greenwashing. So what is greenwashing? Greenwashing, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Is disinformation disseminated by an organization to present an environmentally responsible public imaging, AKA go paperless, get your statements digitally, and you're saving the environment. You're saving trees. All of those kinds of misconceptions that they use to save money on print, on mail, buy your books digitally. It's like, because that way you're not hurting the environment. That's not the case at all. But there's a lot of corporate messaging, a lot of organizations that use that to save money. They use that to up their environmental badge, with their consumers. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe it. So 65% of those who have seen greenwashing claims say that these messages influence them to switch from paper to electronic communications. So it's significant. So we have a lot of work to do to, again, start telling the truth about the environmental story. And so that's one of the reasons why Two Sides exists, is to do this work. And Kathy, again, on the call, over her 4-year tenure, had a number of wins to change that messaging that went out to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of consumers on a regular basis. What were some of those companies that we saw? Well, we saw American Express, Medicare, United Healthcare. Think about their audiences. Those were organizations that were using misconstrued and not true statements to turn their consumers. So as the only anti-greenwashing organization in the North America, we are directly going after corporations, organizations, anyone who's out there communicating those negative, untrue messages. Right now, over 200 North American companies in the last 10 years that Two Sides has been doing this have changed their messaging, over 1,000 globally. So that represents not only billions of misleading environmental messages removed, there's also a big economic impact, because we're all in business. We're all here to make money, but we're doing it in a responsible way using paper. So let's look at what that financial impact has been. In North America, the annual work that was done last year, for example, based on the paper, print, mailing, all the revenues that were saved because those messages were taken off, estimated to be $300 million. That's a significant number. It saved jobs. It keeps people and organizations, printers, binders, paper manufacturers going. And we need that cycle to continue. So the work we're doing, not only does it feel right, not only is it elevating our industry, it's also saving jobs and continuing to bring the revenues in that we need to keep our circular economy going with paper. So it's a really important piece. So that's the work we do. So when we get into the weeds on our greenwashing fights, we have a lot of myths and facts and a lot of data that we use to justify why they need to change that messaging. Jill's going to dive into some of those.
Thanks. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. One of the statistics that we didn't show in this presentation that came from the Trend Tracker report was a little bit about consumer perceptions with regard to preferences for paper. And part of that data, we saw that 50% of consumers prefer to read books on paper, and that's up from 44% in 2021. So there, whether it's COVID, whether it's digital fatigue, whether it's understanding, trust, I think we're seeing across the board that even in younger millennials, that there is a preference for print on paper. As we are so attached to our devices, sometimes we want to move away from them and go back to the printed page. And there is some data that represents that. And one of the things that we're looking for input from BMI members is what kind of data is valuable to you to have to share with your customers, with your end users. We do these trend tracker reports, and we'd like to be able to tailor the questions and gather information that's going to be valuable to our members. So if you have input on that, we welcome your feedback. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in before we move on to some of the myths and facts about the sustainable case for paper. So all of us have a stake in this industry. Our livelihoods are connected to paper, and so whether you're a manufacturer or a supplier, or a merchant, printer, as Jules mentioned, our membership kind of crosses across the industry, and we all have a stake in the game. And so helping us to spread that message is really critical for the health of our industry. So what are some of those misconceptions and myths that we're dealing with? That the production and use of paper and paper-based packaging cause deforestation. So the first thing that we kind of need to talk about is, what is deforestation and what does that mean? So deforestation is the permanent conversion of forest land to non-forest use. So sustainable forestry and using of trees to make wood products is not considered deforestation because those trees are renewable, they're replanted, they grow back. And so keeping forests is critical to combat deforestation. Some of the key causes of deforestation globally, agriculture. In the US specifically, which is the market we're focused on for this presentation, it's urban development. In Canada, it's the oil and gas industry. There's, transportation. There's a myriad of other causes of deforestation, and it's but paper and wood products is not one of them because forests are regenerated. So when we talk about sustainable forestry, we're talking about kind of the whole picture of regeneration of forests and best practices. So, it's about the soil, the air, the water, the social and economic benefits to the communities, to indigenous rights. There's a myriad of considerations that are taken with sustainable forestry. And, we talk about certifications, and a lot of the certifications for FSC, SFI, PEFC, all take these factors into consideration. 10% of the world's forests are certified. But if you look at North America, it's a much higher percentage. In Canada specifically, 77% of their crown land is certified. So looking at that certification is a key part of having a sustainable product and making sure that, where your pulp and paper is sourced, those kinds of things all factor into the decisions we make about how sustainable our products are. So, again, instead of relying on that misconception about deforestation, we need to know that the forests are not shrinking in North America. And actually, between 1990 and 2020, there was an additional 18 million acres of forest land. So forests are regenerated. It's a part of the cycle of forestry for the print and paper industry. And tree harvesting occurs on less than 2% of forest land each year. So it's a very small percentage in relation to natural events like insects, disease, or fire. So it's a very small percentage. So. A consideration too is who owns the forest. So in the United States, over half of the forest land is privately owned. So these are small landowners that manage the forest lands. These are family forest owners. These are smaller entities that rely on wood as a source of income. So, you can see the statistic that 89% of the wood harvested in the United States comes from these privately owned forests. In Canada, it's a little different. There's a lot more crown land, publicly owned forests, but in the United States, it's a big percentage of where our harvests come from. And why that's important is that we need a dependable market of responsibly grown fiber to maintain that forest land. So you want to keep forests. It's an economic engine and a driving force for these private forest owners to be able to utilize the land that they have and get the financial benefits of it, and then replant them and continue to have them as forests. So being able to have a source to be able to provide your wood fiber is critical. Rather than selling it off for non-forest uses like development or agriculture. So we want to be able to provide them that reliable source of income. So another common myth is that paper is a major contributor to climate change. It uses a lot of energy, releases a large amount of CO2 into the atmosphere, and really that's not the case. If you look at the information from the EPA, the forest industry in the United States, and it's only less than 1%, 0.6% of total US greenhouse gas emissions, which is a very minimal amount compared to other industries. One of the reasons for that is because about 64% of the mills in the United States use biomass as a form of energy. This is a renewable energy source, and it contributes to the greenhouse gas emissions for paper mills. And one thing to consider when you're looking at CO2 emissions is the whole life cycle of the product that you're purchasing. So, you have to take into account, transportation, geography, where is the fiber coming from? How is the power supplied to the mill? Are they using more fossil fuels? Are they using more hydroelectric? Are they using biomass? And the reason I bring this up is there's so many factors that contribute to the sustainability of paper that, we try and plug in these calculators that say how green is my paper, how much CO2 emissions are there, and they're good tools to kind of get a gauge, but really every mill is different. Every mill has unique attributes. They've got different power sources. They're shipping to different locations, and it's the same for an end user or a publisher or anyone buying paper. You have to take into account all of those pieces of that puzzle to determine how sustainable your product is. So you can't rely on any one particular piece of it. So that's something to consider when you're making your sustainability choices. So another myth that we have is the production of paper uses excessive amounts of water. Yes, mills are located near sources of water, rivers, large bodies of water, because they do use a large amount of water in the process. But most of that water is not consumed by the process. If you've ever been in a paper mill, you understand how much water goes through a paper machine. It's heated and recycled over and over and over again. That recycling is critical because once you heat the water, you want to use less energy to have to reheat it again. So it goes through the process multiple times, with about 90% of it cleaned, cooled, and returned back to the source. So about 1% of the water remains in the product, 90% returned, and the rest evaporates back into the environment. So if you're driven by a paper mill, you see the white plumes coming out of the top of a paper mill, is primarily steam. That's all steam coming out of the process. So yes, paper does require a large amount of water, but it is recycled, reused, and very little is actually consumed. So another myth, that using paper products is wasteful and goes to landfills. Well, I think most of the people in this industry have seen the recycling numbers and understand that a huge percentage of paper is recycled. So 68% was the latest number from the AF&PA that is recycled, and for corrugated it's even larger, it's 94%. So as consumers, we've all gotten used to recycling our Amazon boxes, our packaging. Most municipalities have a good paper recycling program, which has been critical, and also the paper industry has done a good job of building that recycling infrastructure. It's a a byproduct that goes back into the manufacture of new products. And so it's critical to have that continued source of recycled products as compared to plastics or glass or metals, which have a much lower recycling rate. So it's really a success story for the paper industry. And again, I touched on this, it's spending billions on that recycling infrastructure and that support from the community standpoint that really helps reinforce that ability to recycle, have that high level of recycling for paper. There still is the misconception that, well, why can't we just use 100% of recycled product to make more paper? You know, the fiber's got to start somewhere. So we have to have an ongoing continual supply of fresh fiber to work into the process. And the reason that is because paper can only be downcycled. You can't make a brighter, whiter, cleaner sheet from recycled products. So you can make, corrugated and brown products and things, but it has to be downcycled. It can't be upcycled. So about 5 to 7 times, the fibers continue to break down and get shorter and weaker. So there is a limit to the ability of those fibers to be recycled. So that requires a constant source of fresh fiber to come into the process. The other reason is there's the end use. There's a need for bright, white, clean sheets for specific applications. There's a need for medical packaging to have a clean white sheet versus a recycled paper. So there's different applications that need different types of fiber and recycling content. So yes, using recycled content is great. It's a good way to incorporate and build that circularity of the paper products, but there is also a need to continually have fresh virgin fiber in our fiber source. So again, our manufacturing process would quickly come to a halt if we didn't have that fresh fiber within our process. Again, talking about the circular economy. So paper really truly is a part of the circular economy. Excuse me. Uses a renewable resource. So trees from sustainably managed forests supply fiber, capture, store carbon. We can have a whole discussion about monocultures and biodiversity and things like that, but really the bottom line is that trees are a renewable resource, and we clean and return all that processed water back to the environment. We recover a high percentage of the byproduct that we produce to create new products. So it is something that can be improved, and we continue to improve it in the paper industry, but it is contributing to the circular economy. So one of the additional myths that we run into is around electronic communications, that it's greener than print on paper. We're not advocating that paper should replace electronics. That would be a kind of a ridiculous argument at this point. We all are beholden to our devices. We have them attached to us. But there is an environmental effect of digital devices that people don't consider. So they're made with non-renewable materials. They are disposed of readily. I mean, probably everybody on this call has a drawer with at least 10 devices that they've disposed of over the, as they upgrade each year. The manufacturers design them that way, right? They require environmentally intensive mining and drilling. It's a limited resource, and they use a considerable amount of energy. So, and we have more and more devices that we've acquired over time. So server farms, our energy sucks. So, you know, they require a huge amount of energy to keep our devices and our information stored and the internet running. And it's increasing. So you can see it's 9% annually of power required to maintain our digital devices. And as far as, you know, what does that equate to as far as greenhouse gas emissions? We see an increase in global emissions due to digital technologies. So, you know, the bottom line is we're not going to get rid of our electronic devices, but we also can't say that they're better for the environment than paper is, without, you know, considering the facts of how they're made, the energy they use, how they're disposed of. All of those play a role in how we make those considerations, and the waste that they contribute to. A very small amount of electronic devices are recycled. And again, as we replace our devices every year, there's more and more waste that we have to consider. So, you know, that kind of gives you a quick overview of some of the facts that the paper industry, you know, is battling, the misconceptions. And, you know, we continue to do research and fact-based gathering of information. We have a number of fact sheets on our website that kind of go through the statistics of all of this information that allow you to help share this story with your customers, with your salespeople. And Jules is going to go through kind of your sustainability elevator speech to talk through, you know, how you can use these in your communications. Jules?
Yep. So yeah, so again, just to kind of sum up a lot of the information that was handed out today, and as Jill said, on our fact sheets, we have a lot of the details that can back up some of these talking points. But we tried to drill it down to some very nice bite-sized pieces that you can use on your website. You can share again with your sales reps. Using communication. And we are in the process also of developing some other tools and resources for members to be able to utilize graphically, because we're all scanners nowadays. So as much as we love all this information, we're going to try to also disseminate it into a way that's very quick. But first of all, paper is made from a renewable resource. Trees are purpose-grown, harvested, and regrown in sustainably managed forests or from recycled paper. Okay, it's a fact. So that's an easy one to talk to people about right out of the gate. Harvesting trees to make paper products is not the cause of deforestation, because the trees grow back through regeneration or sustainable forest management. We have a bigger problem with forest fires and other issues as far as deforestation goes. Our industry, the paper industry, is not part of that issue. The third elevator speech, paper manufacturing is not a major cause of greenhouse gas emissions. They do not majorly contribute to climate change. We only use 0.6% of the total. We're only responsible of 0.6% of the total US emissions. And on a regular basis, paper manufacturers are watching that and continue to improve their processes. Just like all of you in manufacturing, the paper industry continues to keep an eye on that. The next piece that I'd like to share is nearly all the water used in paper manufacturing is cleaned to meet strict water quality standards and returned to its source. Again, whether it's into the environment through steam, through other recycling methods, water is not a resource that the paper industry is tapping into in a negative way. Number 5, more than 2/3 of paper and paper-based packaging gets recycled more than any other material. I had a presentation last week, and somebody asked about office recycling. right? They're like, well, because of that C word again, is that gone down, that people aren't recycling as much paper? And we took a look at the stats. It had a little dip. It's pretty much right back up on the same track. So definitely that is still a very strong piece on the recycling side. All right. The life cycle of paper is already circular, period. Minimizes resource use, carbon emissions, and waste. It is by far, as we're seeing more packaging go into paper-based, we're seeing, again, people wanting that touch and feel, but we want to know that it's a good environmental story. Paper has a great story to tell when it comes to that circular lifestyle and life cycle. So it's important that we share that information. And lastly, electronic communication is not greener than print on paper. It definitely is an important part of all our lives, all of our manufacturing facilities, everyone is plugged in, right? I mean, it's just the way of the world. But it has wide-ranging environmental impact. So paper is still the better story to tell. That being said, we wanted to thank you again. This is a big, broad, lots of information, but hopefully helpful information. Maybe you got a new nugget or two, might have sparked a few questions. Our website, twosidesna.org. We have on our greenwashing page, we have a link to a form. Is that right, Jill?
Correct.
And
Yep.
so if you see a claim, you see something on a website, in a direct mail piece you receive, something else, we invite you to upload that, report that to us, and we'll work to contact and see if we can get that changed. We invite you also to follow us on social media channels, reshare the information we share out there on a regular basis. Again, the more our voices come together to tell the truth about print, paper, and paper-based packaging and books, and that application, the more we're going to change that consumer perception. We'll do what we can, but we need our community to help share that as well. And if you want to contact us, please do. Matt knows how to get a hold of us as well. So
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Really appreciate it. If folks have questions, feel free to ping them through the chat here. One that came through, there's a lot of different, I hesitate to use the word certification bodies, but a lot of organizations out there doing things around sustainability. We'll just put it that way. So have you worked at all with folks like Book Chain Project, EcoVadis, Econometrica, SEDEX, any of these folks? A lot of them are more European based, but that are doing a lot of data collection and looking at the sustainability and environmental side of the book space.
On the European side, no, we haven't worked with those organizations, but we do have a partner organization in the EU. Two Sides is a global organization, so if there are concerns in other parts of the globe, most likely we have a Two Sides representative that can assist, provide data specifically. If there is specific questions about certification's complicated, right? So it depends on if it's chain of custody certification, forestry certification. But if there are specific questions that anybody has, we can certainly find that information for you or help source that information. We have resources that, FSC uses independent auditors. So, there's every certification body has different criteria. Again, there are, like you said, Matt, there are a lot of them out there. So it's hard to give a broad comment about certification. Certifications are growing though. I mean, we've seen if you look at reports and the data, there are increasing certification numbers from FSC, SFI, PEFC, those 4 certifications. So it's becoming, it's kind of plateaued a little bit, and there's some shifting to different types of certifications, and the certifications are learning how to adapt as well to technology, requirements. It's hard for small landowners to become certified versus larger corporations. And so they have to adapt to those things. So it's kind of an ongoing and changing landscape for certifications. So
Yeah, I mean, so we work with Book Industry Study Group, BISG, as well as Book Industry Communication, BIC in the UK, and BookNet Canada have come together to form the Green Book Alliance, and they've working on various states of the sustainability issues around books, one of which that we're working with them on is a checklist that publishers and printers can agree on about the ways to answer specific questions and measure certain things. And I guess that's where the folks like BookChain and EcoVadis and are coming in and around measuring, because the different things, scope 1, 2, 3, all the different things that we're being asked to measure now, um, for it's easier for some than others, and the data is good for some than others, and just trying to figure out kind of that standardization of questions, standardization of measurement. Are we doing this in, you know, inches or centimeters or whatever the numbers are going to be, that kind of thing. So I think it's probably where the two of you and I'll just have to keep talking and see if it makes sense for you guys to be part of stuff along that journey. But those are some of the things that our folks are dealing with quite a lot these days. So
I would say yes, because again, sorry, Jill, but as we are tapping more into the mail organizations, I think this is a real perfect opportunity for us to get more engaged on the different applications on how print is being used and paper is being used. So,
sure.
Yeah.
And it's a different, depending on where you are in the supply chain as well. I mean, the paper is running into the same questions about, what are the regulations going to be? What, if you're exporting into the EU, there are certain, new requirements that are coming down the pipeline that are going to be really problematic for a lot of the manufacturers. And so I think it's just like you said, Matt, staying on top of it, trying to standardize it as much as possible, because depending on where you are in the supply chain is different for printers, what they're measuring versus what paper manufacturers are concerned about and measuring. And so, trying to coordinate those, and there's a ton of organizations that do this work. So trying to figure out how do you coordinate all of those efforts. So you're staying on top of what's going to be critical to the end user and from a regulation standpoint as well. So
yeah, for sure. Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
You can always reach out more. And again, we invite you to log on and take a look at the resources we have and communicate what other resources would be helpful, because that's what we're here for. Plain and simple, we're here to create resources that are going to support the print, paper-based packaging, book manufacturers, mail stream, anything that we can that's paper-centric. So we're excited to take what's been done all these 10 years and continue to evolve and elevate it. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your guys' partnership and that of Kathy before you. You guys do great work. We want to continue to support the efforts that you all make. And just as a little small commercial for BMI members that are going to our spring meeting in the DC area at the beginning of May, we will have a session kind of what's going on the government affairs side of things, and we will have Mark Pitts from the AFMPA on that panel to kind of give us what's going on, give us some information about what's going on the paper side of things with regards to the government affairs regulatory environment. But we'll have folks from AAP, the National Foreign Trade Council, as well. So that should be an interesting continuation of some of the things that we've talked about here, and a little bit more into the weeds on the government and regulatory side. So make sure you guys sign up for that, and have a great Easter weekend. Thank you everybody for joining us. If you need to contact me or Two Sides folks, you can just go through BMI and we'll make those connections. All right. So thank you much, ladies. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
you.